Okay, hi everybody, welcome.
Hello.
Hi, welcome, come on in. Okay, how are you? I think I know everyone in the room, but just in case, my name is Ellen Walter. I work with Lauren Yamagata, who you have seen running back and forth, here in the IRC DC office here in WeWork with a number of you in the room. So welcome, thanks so much for coming today. We hope you'll be able to stay for some snacks and drinks afterwards. And we're doing this for many reasons. It's part of a learning series that we've been doing kind of all year long that will continue. So trying about once a month to just gather folks from the WASH sector to talk about what we think are interesting WASH topics. So this time we're talking about district master plans, and it's not a coincidence that we're doing that while Patrick is in town. And so this is, for those that don't know him, Patrick Moriarty, the CEO of IRC. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to go ahead. We do have some folks online, so I'll be keeping an eye on that in the back, but it's pretty informal, just a bit of a presentation and then some good discussion and then lots of networking. So, welcome.
Good. Well, thanks very much, Alan. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Yeah, it's nice to be here and to present about this. So, like Alan said, I'm Patrick Moriarty. I'm CEO of IRC, IRC WASH, not the other IRC. Always have to do that when we're in the US. I'm based in the Netherlands, which is the headquarters of IRC. For those of you who don't know us, Alan's our face in the US. Alan and Lauren. Where's Lauren?
She's just getting people from the
Okay, cool. So IRC WASH, we're 50 this year, so we were IRC's originally, yeah. Me too, by the way, but anyway. So IRC's, we were set up in 1968. We were set up as the WHO International Reference Center for Community Water, hence IRC, which has sort of stuck ever since. But since 2000, and set up as the Dutch government, by the Dutch government essentially as a library and a knowledge center that was supposed to draw together Dutch and global expertise to feed to WHO as they, as part of their mission to make that available, that information available to member states. Fast forward to 2018, we're now completely independent non-profit, stichting foundation under Dutch law, headquartered in the Netherlands and with offices in 6 countries. So that's sort of something we've done over the last 10 years, is to begin to decentralize, and we have offices in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Uganda, in Honduras, and a small presence in Delhi. And what we've been doing, I think, for the last 5 years or so, is beginning to really champion what we call a systems approach to WASH. So I think any of you who know us, we have a long track record, sort of coming out of, first of all, focusing on sustainability, then saying it's not about the hardware, it's about the services, it's about the sustainability of the hardware to deliver those services. And I think in the last 4 to 5 years, increasingly using the language of systems to put that together, to say, it's developing WASH, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is all about creating sustainable WASH systems, national and local, that are going to be able to deliver services over time, and then we can all pat ourselves on the back as more than NGOs and go home, give up more than NGOs and donors and all the rest. What I wanted to talk about a little bit today was one experience in one of the countries, in one of our countries, in Ghana, in a district called, that's not good.
Just move the mouse over a
Mouse
bit.
over a bit.
Yeah, and then you should be able to click right on the presentation.
Click right on the presentation.
Yeah. To advance it.
That seems to be working about as well as pressing the
Let me
down.
see if I can do it from
Pressing the down button. Well, there, Asutifi North. So, Asutifi North is as in IRC's strategy, our theory of change, we have the idea that if we can drive towards universal access in 1, 2, or 3 districts, worridas, communes in a country, we can sort of model what that looks like and inspire replication and uptake for the country. And that's our strategy from now to 2030 says we're going to commit ourselves to doing that and partner districts in those 6 countries, 1.5 million people, and we're going to basically we sign MOUs with local government and we say we're going to walk with you until we get to universal access. You don't know how to do it, we don't know how to do it, but together we're going to work it out. And not just with local government and ourselves, but with other partners. So a lot of what I want to talk about and emphasize today is a lot about partnership and leadership, systems leadership as part of how you drive systems change. That's Asutifi North, 62,000 people or so at the moment. It's going to be about, I didn't fill that in, it's going to be about 85,000 by 2030, we reckon. Urbanizing quite fast, and at the moment, you see 4% safely managed water, 40% basic, so the other 50% currently unserved, and sanitation, 11% safely managed, 5% basic, all the rest unserved, including 4% open defecation. Just a bit of scene setting. There Asutifi North is, in the Brong-Ahafo region in Ghana. We have a much more complicated and theory of change than this, but I'm not going to bore you with it today. This is our very sort of simple high-level theory of change that's guiding us over the next till 2030. And we basically say, what is it that we do? We do system strengthening. Does that create? That creates strong wash systems. Those systems deliver services. Those services contribute to improved health and well-being. And what we often break that down to is saying there's the what and there's the how. So the what that we're trying to achieve is strong systems. And think about what does that look like? What do strong wash systems look like? What do weak wash systems look like? So they're capable of delivering services. And then the how do you do systems change? And the heart of that how is basically collective action. So our understanding, and without going nerdy out on it too much, is that rural wash and particularly rural wash, it's a complex system, it's a complex adaptive system, it's got multiple actors in it, they have multiple incentives and incentive structures that often those are out of alignment. That's one of the reasons that systems are so weak, that if you want to drive change, it's about effectively bringing people together to collective action. Those are the processes that we're seeking to support and to drive in the districts where we work with broad coalitions of other actors. But just to talk a little bit about the what first, but I primarily want to talk about a little bit about the how and what we're doing in Asutifi North. But this is a sort of a big part of our high-level rethinking or high-level advocacy and messaging to the wash sector. When we talk about wash as a system, is to say lots of us have spent years thinking about wash essentially in terms of infrastructure. You develop, deliver a hand pump, and off you go, job done. We all know that doesn't work. We all know that they fail after a couple of years. And we're increasingly trying to talk in terms of systems blindness. We say that a lot of the wash sector suffers from systems blindness. That people you turn on the tap, the water comes out, you flush the toilet, your business goes away, and you don't think about what makes all of that happen. So a big part of our advocacy mission is about trying to remove that systems blindness in the first place. That's a really critical first step to beginning to get folks to engage around strengthening the systems. This slide sums up 2 or 3 kind of key points we want to make. One is that we conceptualize the wash system in terms of a number of building blocks. We say you have of which infrastructure is one, but only one. So we identify these 9 building blocks. We say, look, you've got to have legislation, you've got to have ability to plan, you've got to have your institutions, you've got to have finance, you've got to have some form of regulation, monitoring, water resource management, and learning and adaptation, particularly if you're talking about things like resilience. Why do we have the other systems here? Because this language, this thinking, is super well embedded in other sectors that deliver social services, like health, like education. Health system strengthening is something that donors pour tens of millions of dollars into, or lots of money. You go visit a health, look at a health management information system, go and visit the health folks in Ethiopia. You visit the WASH people, and there's two guys with one laptop between them.
Just a bit, just you're talking
too fast.
A little bit fast.
Sorry, apologies to those
internet.
online. I will try and slow down for the internet. I think all of us, there's lots of you in here, you work with the folks who are doing monitoring and evaluation in WASH. They're underfunded, they don't have laptops. Go visit the health management information system folks. Well equipped, lots of money. So part of the method, we'll just say, look, let's try and begin to think about WASH a bit more the way we think about things like education and health. No one is counting educational achievement on how many new schools you built. Nobody's is looking at and judging health system strengthening by have you built a new clinic. But in WASH, we do that all the time. Say, how many people did you serve this year? How many hand pumps have you built, and how many people have been served? Okay. And what I like about this is that we also say, look, the progress we're able to make in a country, we do tend to focus down into our system. We're all WASH systems nerds. We love WASH. We talk about WASH all the time. But actually, WASH is a small part of a country. Health and education are typically much better funded. So is ag, so is all sorts of other things. If decentralization is generally underfunded, if it's contested, if mandates aren't clear, it's very difficult to move ahead radically on WASH if your wider political economy isn't in place. So we talk in WASH quite often about the enabling environment, and some of this is about trying to separate out what bits of the enabling environment are really specific to the WASH system, like have we clearly identified where regulatory functions sit, and which bits of the political economy are just part of the broader political economy. How is decentralization working? So, a core part of what we're trying to do is to use these building blocks to carry out assessments, to identify priorities, and to begin to address those priorities with these coalitions of people that we're putting forward. So that's a little bit about the what. The how. This is a conceptualization that we use in IRC. There's lots of other ways to think about this, but this is what we seek to do with the coalitions of partners that we work with, or to support the coalitions in working through this, okay? In engaging people in some sort of vision. So this master plan that we've been engaged in, and that is an artifact of this encapsulates a vision. It also encapsulates a lot of diagnosis. Not IRC's diagnosis, not the NWA's diagnosis in Ethiopia. Diagnosis by the local actors. Diagnosis by local government, aided by us. A vision that belongs to them. So, a master plan document that comes with the seal of the government of Ghana, not of IRC, not of the Hilton Foundation who paid for this, not of any of us. Carry out, do the vision and the diagnosis, and then begin to identify where are the challenges, what are some potentially exciting solutions we'd like to work on together, and then get into a process of testing some of those solutions out. Some of it's easy, some of it's hard. The critical point, and the point that we've been enabled in a lot, I think, by the SDG, adoption of the SDG, is that it's really easy now to put on the table that, guys, we're all focusing for universal access. But that's a big ask. So how are we going to get to universal access? The assumption, our big hypothesis, if you like, that we've been testing over 10 years, and the hypothesis behind any sort of collective action approach or collective impact approach is that if you walk a partnership of key system actors through a process like this, you build in the channels and mechanisms to achieve scale. By ensuring that the right people are involved as you go around, by feeding them, by helping to develop that vision, by supporting testing of solutions, by providing a monitoring framework that allows folks to see, are we moving along the path towards our vision? We can, when stuff works, it will scale rapidly. And I think we've got good evidence that that works. Not necessarily that getting the whole district to scale has been replicated, but that many of the aspects we've done, for example, introducing service delivery monitoring in Ghana, went from testing in 3 districts to being a sort of national model within 5 years because of adopting an approach like this. Now, but that's a sort of generic theory of change, I guess, if you like, theory of action of what we try to lead our.
Can I ask a clarifying question there? I don't think you guys so much scale up as scale out. In the sense that I think when you're doing this, you're trying to do it at some scale while you're doing it. And then it's more about replicating that in other places as opposed to, but anyway.
Yeah, no, so good insider outsider comment. So we already say that we try to do this at a meaningful unit of scale. The district is the primary unit of intervention. There's a reason that we're not intervening at the level of a household or a community. And that we tend to say what we're doing, and even that's an oversimplification, but that we look at the district. Why? Because the district, the lowest level of local government, has a legitimacy as a service delivery area, as an area where you have government coming together with civil society, with you getting enough scale to begin to be able to look at the sustainability of private sector models, etc., etc., etc. Now, in fact, in practice, districts look very different in different countries. Asutifi North has a population of 60,000. Cabarole, which is our partner district in Uganda, has a population of 250,000. Indian districts have a population of several million. And a district exists within a region, within a province, within whatever. So, I think the key insight that we all know is that interacting with the political economy of watch means being multi-scalar. Having said which, we do think that a critical level of scale for intervention is that lowest level of local government. That's where you can legitimately begin to say, how do we get to universal access? Okay? Because then you begin to say, well, here's the small town, and here's the village, and here's the folks at the top of the hill who aren't part of either. If your level of scale of intervention is a community, it's much harder to do that. It's much harder to deal with the problems that you get to as you get towards universal access, where you're dealing with how do we get to the last 10%. So, thanks for that.
In general, do you want questions as you go along? Or
I think I prefer, this is on the last slide, and then all happy to open up, because that's all the conceptual sort of flim-flam, and I think that all of us, as a 25-year watch system nerd, technocrat, engineer, geographer, hydrologist, like lots of us in this sector, have a tendency to sort of like to go to the drawings, the 5-point plans, the 7-point plans, the 3 phases or 6 phases. In fact, all of our experience in how to do this is that those are all really useful things. They're nice kind of crutches to hold you up on, to lean on, or whatever, but actually this is all about people. This is all about leadership. And this sort of, the change that we're trying to drive in WASH comes down to making sure that you engage people. And it sounds so easy. You say, oh, well, let's get everyone together to do a vision. But how do you get people together to develop a vision? What's the sort of pull that you need to have? What sort of people do you need who are able to draw a group of folks together who, let's some of these. And these are all some of the people who are involved in developing that master plan. You have, there's the paramount chief for Asutifi North, but there's 4 traditional chiefs. There's in this group, this was at the launch of the master plan, you have the regional MP, you have the district chief executive, you have the district planner, you have representatives of the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, you have representatives of the market women, you have a wide landscape of different people in a district. And if you want to our belief is that if you want to do effective collective action, you have to have the convening power to bring them together. So one of the things we've learned is that, you know, it's hard to see it, but that's our country director. There she is. That's our country director in Ghana. So that's one of the things you need. You need someone with the soft power, the convening power. You know, Vida is a planner by background. She's not from a WASH background at all, though she has been before working for IRC, very involved in local government reform, decentralization. She has a fantastic network from the very most senior sort of levels of Ghanaian politics right down into district planners and officers. Who else do we have? We have Jeremiah Attendem, who's one of our technical specialists. He was spent a year in the district leading through this master planning process, leading this group of people through a series of exercises, asset inventorization, life cycle costing, what do we have already, what's working, what's not working, what levels of service are being delivered, and what does it mean to engage with that vision of universal access. It's that sort of convening power and leadership. Who else did I want to call out? I don't think you can see him in there, but we also have our communication officer, Abu Wumbe, so who ensures a kind of flow of information backwards and forwards to this network of people who are engaged in this, as well as all our local actors. The coalition who are signed up to supporting this master plan between now and 2030, who signed this MOU, includes, well, we've got the Conrad Hilton Foundation, who are supporting all of this process. We have Safe Water Network, who have done a lot of work on developing small water enterprises in Ghana. We have World Vision, who are in this committed to supporting us to particularly do rural point sources, bringing solar power, mechanizing existing water points. We've got Acquire Institute, CDC. So what we've been able to do is to convene a broad coalition of actors, local and international, to come together under this shared master plan. The master plan was launched when? In March, I think. That's when we were all there, yeah. We launched the master, yeah, and lots of us were there. We launched the master plan in March. We've just developed the MOU. At the moment, we're working with the district on identifying what the next steps are, what the low-hanging fruit is that we can quickly begin to develop to continue to get the buy-in of particularly of our district partners. The master plan is the first step. The master plan is an artifact from a process. I think for us, the lesson again of the leadership is that it has to be continuous. We have a facilitator based in the district working with local government and engaging in a process now of review. So we'll every year come back to the master plan and do a sort of joint sector review, but at a district level of how are we doing. Because if you look through this, and I think encourage people to have a look, it's still quite high level. I mean, we've got buy-in of the leadership to the idea that we're going to get to universal access. We've put some numbers down. It's a lot of money. It's $20 million for sanitation. It's $11 million for water. We have some bits of it. We think we have identified some of the models that can deliver that. We think we've identified some of the money. One of the partners here, and where this district is lucky, is that they have a big mining company, Newmont, Ghana, who are also present in the district and who spend a lot of CSR. It's a relatively wealthy district. One of the exciting things about the level of buy-in we've got is that the district is prioritizing spending out of its own budget towards this, but frankly, there's still a huge financial hole that needs to be filled. And that's part of the challenge we have now moving forward. But I think what's been exciting so far is getting the level of commitment from the senior politicians, from the senior technocrats, but also this quite interesting coalition of different partners, all of whom are committed to working together to solve some of the challenges. I think that's what I wanted to say about where we are, how we work. I think what I really would emphasize, closed up, again, I've said it several times, is that the main three things, perhaps, that have got us this far is we're taking away the systems blindness, getting a real realization from everyone from the paramount chief to the district chief executive to his planning officer that if they want to get to universal access, they're going to have to do more than just find money to fund new hardware. It's to put this partnership together and to get the whole partnership infused and excited about this vision. And I think, the main role that IRC plays in that is to bring this convening power and leadership. And I think it's not a term we came up with. Lewis introduced it to you the first time, but I think we met the people who invented it yesterday. But the idea of systems leadership. VIDA is we're not out there in front. It's very much leadership from behind. It's leadership that empowers the district planning officer to present to all those people there and say, this is our vision. This is what we're going to do as a district. And I think that's one of the most important skill sets there is to find. Someone who can lead, convene, support without needing to put themselves out in front. Anyone who's not part of the government here will also know that that's an extraordinarily difficult thing to finance. And I think that's one of the big challenges we have in doing this sort of work is how, if you're not stamping your name on everything, you're not branding it too heavily, you're all working towards contribution, do you get somebody to pay for that? And I think that's why we've been very lucky to have the Hilton Foundation, who sort of bought into this concept and way of working and get it. Okay, so that is enough, because I think then I want to have a discussion. And I'm just putting that one up there as a sort of, as a shout out to anyone who's interested for our big 50th birthday symposium that we're doing in March next year in The Hague, which is called All Systems Go, and which is from the 12th to the 14th of March. So we would love to see lots of you folks there. Thank you.
Great. So at this point, I think it's just an opportunity for questions, answers, discussion. It doesn't have to be just to Patrick, but discussion all around, and I'll field questions from those that are online. So Chris and Patricia, feel free to type some questions in.
Is it working very quick? Does everyone know each other?
We could do quick introduction, sure. Yeah.
Just
name
and organization or something. That's nice.
Sure. Well, Patrick and I have already gone, so John, you want to start?
What we have for lunch is at the church.
Yeah.
John Sauer, Senior Technical Advisor for WASH at PSI, and I had leftover salmon and
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Ahonidie again, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Party for USAID's Water for Africa through Leadership and Institutional Support.
I'm Ryan Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's see.
Wallace.
never heard it actually spelled.
I'm Ryan Mahoney from USAID in the Global Health Bureau. Peanut butter sandwich. Running in between meetings like usual.
Great.
Rich Raker, COP of that project.
Wallace.
Marianne LeBlanc, consultant, sometimes at the World Bank.
Brian Banks with Global Water Challenge and Global Environmental Technology.
I'm with the Memphis with ACFO.
Laura Yamagata, I'm the Knowledge Manager for Agenda for Change and also support U.S. partnerships for IRC.
Hi, I'm Jill Giesberry. I'm with Management Sciences for Health, one of the health systems groups that we were talking about.
I'm Caitlin Brewer from Climate International USA.
Laura Brunson from Millennium Water Alliance.
And I'm Eddie Perez with the Sustainable Wash Systems Learning Partnership.
Louis Borston from the Osprey Foundation and also a board member of IRC.
And online we have Chris McGahey, who's an independent consultant, and Patricia Manti from USAID. So who has questions for Patrick or for each other?
Yeah, so it's not so much questions, it's more hopefully a discussion and stuff, but as I've sort of gotten more and more into this whole systems dialogue with you and others and Lewis and stuff, I have a couple of things. One is, first of all, having been part on the sustainable development process of developing the SDG goals for sustainable, safely managed sanitation, I have come to regret profoundly that we did not think enough about, we don't really have any indicators about sustainability. We got indicators about what it means to be safely managed, we got indicators about equity and stuff, but not about sustainability. Then that involves to, as we start thinking about wash systems, in which, in principle I agree, I start thinking, is there such a thing as a generic all-purpose wash system? Or are there different subsystems, one for increasing access and reaching universal access, and one for sustaining those services? So if I think about it in the U.S., as I've thought about it a little bit, we have a system for building new houses and building new sewer systems and wastewater treatment plants. Now that's a totally different cast of characters and a totally different system from then the utility or the service provider, or who's involved in maintaining and ensuring that that stuff is working, those services are working. So, any thoughts on that? And when I've seen the systems work, in general, some stuff that we're involved in, it tends to be focusing on creating systems to improve access.
Yes.
And really kind of gives either no recognition or lip service to sustainability of those services afterwards.
So yes, I completely agree, Eddie. And if we go back to over animation your slides. So if you go back to here, and if we have my ex-colleague Jean de la Harpe, who spent years working in South Africa and service delivery, and then came to work for IRC and has now gone back to Salga in South Africa and does all their infrastructure work, she always said exactly what you're saying. She's like, infrastructure delivery has its own, that's why you find the project cycle. In that infrastructure delivery, that's why you find a project cycle. That's why you find a whole different cast of characters. So, but I would say every single one of these building blocks actually is a subsystem. There's that's the thing about systems. Systems are full of subsystems, and you could nerd out for hours on it, and that's why people, our friends like Link like to do systems mapping, and they want to show all the links, and right. But I think, and sometimes I say building blocks is completely the wrong word. We should call these windows. This is just different ways of looking into a system. What is the system? It's a load of people, and it's a load of links between the people, and it's a load of stuff. And how do the people and the stuff work together? But it's useful sometimes to look at it through these different windows. So let's look at it through the planning window. Do we have the capacity to plan? Do we have the capacity to plan for projects to deliver infrastructure? Do we have the capacity to plan for services over the long term? Do we have the right legislation in place to allow for some more contracting and clear procurement rules? That's one thing. But do we have that? We all want to do PPPs, but do we actually have a legal framework that defines clearly what a concession looks like? And we go, hey, why is the private sector not coming in? Well, probably because you can't guarantee that they own the assets. You haven't told them how long they're allowed to manage them for, but you just want them bringing their money in, right? So, and one of the interesting things is, I think, that why is it that we're so focused on infrastructure? Because in a way, infrastructure delivery, because it's relatively easy to do. All the typical weaknesses that we find at a local government level or whatever, you can overcome by doing infrastructure delivery in a project form. You can bring in all those skills. You can find drillers, you can find engineers. You bring them in for a set amount of time. They deliver their thing and then they leave. And the trouble is, because we only focus on that subsystem, we forget that to make for sustainability, all the rest of this stuff is needed. So yeah, absolutely. That's very much how I think about it. And like I said, Jean was always super strong on that. So infrastructure, that's about procurement, that's about planning, that's about delivery of new infrastructure. Then someone's got to manage it all.
Kind of two questions, if that's allowed. So one question is, you guys, as part of Agenda for Change, are working in several districts, this being one, and it seems like there's been a lot of priority on this one district. Is this type of master planning something you guys are looking at doing through Agenda for Change or through IRC and other districts that you guys are focused in? And then the other one is more to the point that you guys have been really fortunate to find someone like Hilton that can buy into this and have the flexibility to do that. A lot of donors obviously can't, largely because it's difficult to, or maybe it's difficult to measure, and so it's difficult to prove to the donors that they're even contributing, let alone that any of the impact is attributable to them. So I'd be interested in just kind of what the experience in the trenches has been of trying to figure out, now that you guys are in it because you got the Hilton funding, are you learning anything about how you might be able to start talking to other donors about what you're seeing that they might be able to get on board with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're not in it because we got the Hilton funding. We were very lucky to get the Hilton funding, but we're in it because I believe this is the way.
Absolutely.
No, but seriously, I mean, I'm not just saying that as a pat point. It's because it's exactly the point Eddie was making. You know, if we want to go beyond, because actually the wash sector isn't that bad sometimes at that infrastructure delivery bit, right? I mean, sometimes quality is lousy and all the rest, but actually, you know, tens of thousands of boreholes have been delivered around the world. Sanitation is far worse, but there's been huge investment in capital investment made, and it's there. Okay, but you know, I believe very strongly that part of our systems approach is committing to districts, and that's also about holding us accountable. That's been a big challenge for IRC staff. You know, we're a think tank originally, and now we're a think and do tank, and anchoring ourselves down into these districts has been a big step for us. It's also an approach that I feel that, you know, other partners in the Agenda for Change partnership push. It very much comes out of net residents thinking that net was the one who had everyone forever, and I think, you know, that's still one of the most powerful insights that's driven the sector for the last few years, I believe, in this direction. So yes, this is one district. This is our IRC's partner district in Ghana. There's other districts that we're working with. This is the one where we said we're with you until 2030. However we can, we're going to help you to achieve that vision. Behind this, part of the reason that we developed these building blocks or windows is that whole problem of attribution, contribution, measuring is so critical. So behind this, we spent the last 2 years developing a whole suite of monitoring tools and measuring tools to be able to evaluate current strength and development of the strength in these building blocks. It's very much work in progress. Some of it's stronger than other parts, but you know, as IRC CEO, this is the single most important investment we're making at the moment in IRC, is being able to measure the systems, the strength of the system. We did a lot of work, and I think some quite cutting-edge work at the time on measuring service levels, so we moved beyond just, is there a pump, to what level, what quality service is it delivering? That's still a critical part of the monitoring. But the next stage is being able to monitor, are your systems there? I guess my vision of where this goes in the end, and I don't really care if it's our building blocks or UNICEF's building blocks or whoever's building blocks, is that we move towards some sort of agreed set of benchmarks for system strength in rural wash. Because I think if we can begin to get that discussion going, then you've got a mechanism for systematizing all of this beyond sort of us working in our district and water for people in their district and water aid in their district to bring it up to a national level. But I think we're way off that yet.
There's two from online. Yeah, and then,
can I just add to that point? And Brian, there are other examples. Water for People, I mean, you mentioned that. You know, Water for People has, in Bolivia, really, you know, demonstrated that this work and did it well enough that the government basically picked up their approach and is following up. They expect in Rwanda in March of next year to have one district, Rwanda. So it is, in many ways, this is a fascinating case study because of the Hilton resources, there's enough money to try to do it the right way. But it's not the only case where it's happening by any means.
Yeah, I think the question that's interesting is clearly there's so much insight behind this, but the missing gap seems to be how do you expand the donor base beyond kind of more flexible foundations so that this type of work can be scaled even bigger. And I think the metrics come up in a big way in there.
Yes.
So if you could solve that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Well, but I think, as Patrick said, part of that is, I mean, this is sort of a picture of the what.
Yeah.
I think the better we get at describing the how, and there was a meeting in The Hague a couple of weeks ago that Lauren organized that amongst the existing 9 partners in Agenda for Change, a lot of that discussion was on the how, and in trying to be more articulate, because there's a secret sauce in here somewhere, and it is not just about these sort of elements, it's really about that sort of systems leadership. And how do you lead in a way that puts, I mean, when you hear, I mean, Donna's not a bad example, but if you hear the way Vida, who runs the operations for IRC there, talks about it, she doesn't talk about the fact that she's leading it, she talks about the fact that they support the government in getting this stuff done. And that sort of language and that sort of leading from behind approach, and, you know, if you read about collective impact, you know, which is FSC's sort of branded version of this stuff, all of it is saying the same thing. We've got to be able to articulate that in a way, and as Patrick said, not only do we got to go and measure it.
Right.
Because the better we get at measuring it, the easier it'll be to get the AIDs and the DFIDs and the others to fund it, notwithstanding the fact that AID is already funding the sustainable wash system.
Well, and I think the measurement's also interesting because that's something we'll be able to do better work as well. In 5 years, instead of talking about who did the best water pump, we can talk about who did the best system strengthening, and we can learn from each other. This would be an even bigger drive.
Online.
Yeah, so from online, how do you keep this from being sectorally siloed? Specifically, how do you take advantage of the systems in the health sector and aligning maybe with some of that? And the second one is, how long did it take to go through the process to actually launch in March?
Okay, so the simple one first. They had, I think, the first convening of stakeholders in the district to launch this was in March 2017. We launched in March 2018. So basically, that's a 1-year process to get to this master plan. The more complicated question, how do we stop the sector being siloed? I think one of the things that we see, and I think lots of folks, any of you who do this work at the district level, is actually the district is where the silos to some extent begin to come apart anyway. You know, there's one district planning officer in Asutifi who's responsible for, not for health, because health is actually vertically integrated, isn't a district responsibility, but is responsible for lots of the other things. So at that level, folks do know each other, and people come to each other's meetings. And you know, one of the things that we're very specifically we're looking at is that we're looking at institutional wash as well as wash in healthcare facilities, wash in schools. I mean, that's an obvious place where you can link. Personally, I'd like to see us break out even more of the wash silo, look at nutrition, look at multiple uses, look at all that. But it's ongoing work, I think.
Well, it's even within WASH, right? It's siloed between water and sanitation.
Sanitation and hygiene,
and hygiene, which no one ever talks about at all.
So I wonder if there's, I wonder if there's a moment here or an opportunity that we could be exploiting. I've been doing a couple of desk officer visits USA recently. In each of those, about 15 times in each respective meeting, they've been talking about the journey into self-reliance, which is, believe it or not the title of a yoga session, but is actually a document that they're pushing very, very hard with a number of different countries. And there's a whole, I don't know if you guys are probably over it, but I wonder whether there's a moment here to think about connecting this type of work into those indicators. There are currently 17 different indicators, skills and attributes. So I just want making that natural connection in terms of those of us who are engaged on advocacy with USA, and I wonder whether this is just another moment to make that connection. I know we have USA in the room.
Can I just add to that, because that was part of my question. I think we've been talking about sustainable services.
Yes.
And we kind of have a pretty good idea at this point what that means.
Excuse me, I'm going to turn it up. It's not responding.
You're too popular.
It's very insistent.
But the question I was going to ask was about sustainable wash systems that are sort of less and less dependent on external actors, external donors, and stuff like that. And so, similar kind of question, at least at that subsector. Yeah.
And there is a danger of almost infinite recursion. Yeah, because we're saying infinite recursion because we say you need strong local and national systems to deliver sustainable services, and then you go, yeah, but the systems have to be sustainable too, and then you need great discussions. I mean, recently with Evan Thomas and Sweet Sense, and just talk the whole thing. Yeah, we say so. Monitoring is a critical part of getting to sustainability, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage what you can't measure. If we're not able to see what's not working, then how are we ever going to fix it? So then you get into the life cycle costs of putting sensors onto stuff, and then you realise that you've got to have someone going out and maintaining the sensors. So you've got to maintain the sensors so that you can maintain the pumps. But that's what I mean about it's almost, it's systems and systems. So you're right, it is about sustainable systems. The systems have to be sustainable to make the services sustainable. Yeah, sorry.
I was wondering if you could speak a bit about the leadership part and what kind of leadership specific activities, capacity development you do, and whether you're looking at the other sectors and their experience. Because we know that in agriculture there's a lot of effort to meet the CAADP and the targets for Africa and all of that, food security. So I don't know if you've come across this type of things while working in Ghana.
So I think the leadership. I think we invest a lot in. I think that this sort of systems leadership is really important. So providing that leadership. Providing this backbone function to these partnerships. I think a lot of our work on the nurturing of leadership we seek to do through engagement and involvement in this process. So how do you grow the leadership capacity of a district CEO or a district planning officer? A lot in the districts where we work, a lot of it is by engaging them in this process and just continuously working with them inside of that. Unless you're going to make this relatively heavy investment in every district in the country, at some point you need to begin looking at those to talk about scaling out, and you begin to get other people saying, oh, this is interesting, how are we going to do it? So then there is a much more classic kind of training element where you train for some of these skills. But within this process, a lot of the leadership development is by coaching, actually investing in those processes. And are we, to what extent are we looking at leadership practice in other sectors? I think explicitly, not, and implicitly, lots. I mean, we're hiring people who are keen on leadership and are keen on change, and so they're immersed in that thinking and literature, and they're all parts of women leader networks in Ghana and things. I mean, I think the point is in terms of hiring for this, maybe that's the simplest way to do it, that you're hiring someone for their ability to be a systems leader rather than the fact that they're a wash expert. Parents, we can wash expertise, you can bring in from somewhere else. You're hiring someone who has those networking skills, those leadership skills, that passion, the network, all of that, to be a good leader. And then you're putting a team around them. So if you look at a typical IRC team supporting this in the countries, we'll have our country director, who is the sort of leader I just described. You'll have a communications officer, because communications is critical in knowledge management. You will have a strong technical officer, an engineer, or allied profession, because to be credible, you have to be able to talk the talk to the engineers. And you will have, and that's typically what we have at national level, and then you'll have someone who kind of rolls all of that into one, who's your kind of district level facilitator, and that would be your kind of bare bones structure, I guess.
But these people are working for you and being paid by you, right? Yes. So the question is, how does the government then have those HR practices where they identify and understand the needs and skills, and they go through and then if they attract and are able to successfully recruit this cadre of people, then they can retain and pay at the scale that they're looking for, right? So this is what we're seeing across the board in the developing world, where we go there, we attract the best, and then we leave, and then these people, the next thing they go to the private sector, but they never really go and see their careers being in the government, given their current practices or their HR practices.
So I completely agree. So go back to Asutifi North. So we're super capacitating that district, right? In particular, bringing in, so A, we have the support from Accra, B, we have Ben, who's sitting in the district, well-trained engineer, and a couple of our people have come out of government. So we work in the district. What do we do? One of the things we do, life cycle costing. So asset inventories and life cycle costing. So we do, we've done a lot of work over the last couple of years in a number of districts within Ghana, working out methodologies for doing asset inventorization, working out methodologies for doing life cycle costing. So then, because we're also networking and engaging the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, and they're interested in what we're doing, and that's also part of the theory of change, right? Always interact at the national level. They go, well, this is really exciting. We want to roll out training on this for other districts. So we've done a lot of training on life cycle costing and asset inventory. So that's the training bit. That's one part of it. But the other part that we do, and in some ways is harder, is as part of that life cycle costing, we're saying, how are you paying for your direct support costs? How many engineers do you need? What are you paying for your engineers? And that then becomes that's an advocacy piece. That's an advocacy piece. Because at the end of the day, we're trying, and that's where taking away the systems blindness, right? Because we're saying, look, district assembly, we've gone out, we've done the asset inventory and the monitoring. 30% of your infrastructure is not working. 60% of people aren't even accessing your most basic norm according to your. So they go, well, didn't know that. Why is that happening? We go, well, what's your current spend? Have you got your engineer? How are you motivating your engineer? Some of that can be solved at the district level, but a lot of it can't. Because obviously, it's not a district that's setting pay structure for civil servants in Ghana. So then you have to go and begin talking to the local government, the folks who are doing local government decentralization processes. So, I think, to me, that's what, but creating the space to engage in that discussion has been the big challenge for WASH, because you'll get folks coming and say, oh, well, we'll solve the private sector, let's empower some entrepreneurs, and they'll roll it out. Yeah. So there's no magic to this. This is long, slow work, as Lewis was saying, because every time you sort of say, okay, well, we've solved, here's a solution, this could work, but not if you're not going to, if you don't give your district WASH teams enough money to get fuel in their motorcycles and go out and do their preventive maintenance visits that they're supposed to be doing.
No, there's no informal line. I just wanted to add one quick comment. I think it's also about the empowerment of data use, right? So we're going through the process with them at the district level. So now a district planning officer can go to the whoever is whoever's responsible for financial management within the district, who then has the evidence to go up to the national level to ask for the right things. Yes. In addition to us also looking potentially with the national level people that we're engaging with on the policy. So it's coming from multiple levels, but it's a lot of times that internal advocacy. I was doing a training with some of the education folks. It was on WASH, but there was an education officer who was there who said, I need to be able to do the advocacy just like everyone else who's an NGO in this room, because it's internal advocacy to their colleagues and whoever else holds the purse strings, because that's not who we did. So there's also that element of empowerment around data use, I think, that is a key piece to this process.
It could be explaining to the people from the Ministry of Water how the national budgeting system works, because often, that was my experience in Ghana, is the CWSA at one point was so almost 100% funded out of donor projects that actually they didn't understand how to engage with the national budgeting system. Just didn't know it. Eddie, I think was.
So I wanted to sort of link it back to Darren's comment about what is the word used? Not sustainability. Self-reliance. And this whole leadership discussion. So one of the things that I've been sort of thinking about a lot is that so the SDGs, as you know, better than I do probably, are based on sort of the principles of human rights and universal access. And core to that principle is that the government, both national and at the local level, are the rights bearer. So so one of the things that I always find missing is the word accountability. And sometimes leadership is used as instead of accountability. But I have met with many leaders at different levels who never have a sign that says the buck stops with me. The sign basically says, yeah, I'll help you out as long as aid or the World Bank or somebody gives me some money. And if we don't, it's not our fault. Yes. We're not, so much I can do.
Yes.
So any thoughts on that, on this issue of accountability and, until they feel accountable?
I don't know. Look, we've all been in the sector for far too long, probably. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe you haven't. That's why we invested so much time and effort into getting that guy to stand up there and say, I, as your paramount chief, am committed to having a clean Asutifi North. That's why we committed to getting the regional MP to come there. That's why we got the district chief executive officer to be there. That's why we got the district planning officer to give the presentation on this. That's why the foreword to this is written by the district chief executive. Now, it's a piece of paper, and we've all been involved in doing these sorts of pieces of paper before, and if we walked away from it now, it would probably join all the other pieces of paper that people are putting their laptops on top of. So part of what we're doing is continuing, that's why we are implementing this process of sort of joint sector review, because that's the mechanism, right? Joint sector reviews is the national level mechanism for trying to bring some accountability into the sector. And that's what we're able to introduce at the district level. So civil society is in here. We do a lot of work supporting civil society to try and hold duty bearers to account. It's hard work, but if there's no monitoring in there, there's no data, you certainly can't do it. So transparency on budgets, all of that stuff is part of this package. But yeah, we agree. That's where it is.
I'm interested to go back to Aaron and hear what his thoughts were on your own question.
I don't have any thoughts on the journey to civil rights.
I can say something.
So maybe the other one. I was just going to say, just to tap into accountability, part of the issue with accountability is diffusion of responsibility and overlapping responsibilities, which I think is a problem in Ghana between CDUSA and the district assembly.
Absolutely.
So this lack of clarity and the accountability means it's a pointing game. It's pointing blame at the other one when there's issues, and you got individual community water sanitation teams sending letters both to the district assembly and the CDUSA regional office, and not knowing which one will actually act. So, as much as having a wide tent and getting everyone's buy-in, and, that institutional work about clarifying roles is the important key where I think the accountability hits the road.
And that sounds, I couldn't agree more. Before we started this, I think we invested 4 years in supporting CWSA to clarify their district implementation manual. We rolled that out, helped to roll that out to local government, and then you suddenly we also did a whole process of the start of a change process with CWSA, looking at their role, and then suddenly, just last year, someone came in and they were shifting towards a role of basically being a regulator of the rural sector, and then suddenly said, maybe you'd be better off being a utility. So, yes, it all sounds nice. In fact, decentralization in Ghana and in most other countries that I'm aware of is massively contested. Massively contested. You were talking about infrastructure. Why is it contested? Because there's tons of money going through there. Whether procurement is done by CWSA or the district has huge impact on people's livelihoods.
So that was my other comment for Ryan is that, and you and I, Patrick, have talked about this, and when you talk about system, we as donors and externals are part of that system.
Absolutely.
And by providing all this money that's pouring through the system, are we contributing to being more self-reliant, or are we contributing to these countries being dependent on us? Because they know that sooner or later, whether it's aid of the World Bank or some NGO, somebody's going to come in and repair that hand pump. I mean, particularly true in rural waterfront, where we have created a real dependency.
Ella will handle that.
A couple statements on that, but I wanted to pick up first on what Patrick said a while back about, I think there was a question about how do you get different sectors to work together, and in my experience as well, at the district level, just talking to government, it's not that hard for them because it's really, there are less people, they all know each other, is what Patrick said, and this was in the case of Mozambique, where at the provincial and district level, it was easier to do multi-sectoral planning for wash nutrition, even a little bit of agriculture. So it's fascinating to see because when we talk about systems, at least from a donor perspective, we're interested in national level as well because that's initially you make those bilateral agreements or agreements with the government, but it's harder to do it there, and district is where it's at, and it's easier to provide a case study in terms of scaling it up. You have changed my position from 2 years ago, Patrick, when I was questioning the district. And then I think back to the harder question or the point that Darren was making. I think our group, the water team, is seeing it as really a chance to. A lot of us are trying to push our programming into more of a systems, using systems approach. But as you can only imagine, I mean, you can talk about all those elements or building blocks or whatever you call it, but it's the how. Yes. And you mentioned that. So how do you work on the how and explain it and break it down for our field staff? Right. But when the whole journey to self-reliance became more public, it's really a chance for us to link it back to, hey, this is why the systems approach is really important. Right. And so it's not so public right now, but it's internally that's how we're discussing it with our upper management for budget funding.
The connection I made this morning was we had Kim Leonard from Court for People come and talk to our team, and was just looking at how they've broken down everyone forever across the timeline, and connected indicators towards a phased exit strategy. Yes. I mean, that sort of seems to me, just thinking about it naturally now, is how you begin to make those connections to this journey of self-reliance.
But the last point, the hardest part though, is the metrics are still what they are. You know the F indicators, it's how many thousands of people have improved access, opened up. So I think it's really being able to, and that's been also partly why we're funding, not just IRC, but this whole Sustainable Wash Systems Initiative. How can we collectively think through those metrics? Because it's really hard, it's harder to convince a decision maker, other internations or Congress. Yeah. Well, we don't really know what the numbers are involved in this, but fund it.
And I think this is where, like I say, this is simplified, but we've been trying to develop metrics, and so is everyone in the agenda for change. There's broad, and in sustainable wash systems, this is a broad group of people trying to think through how do you come up with metrics at each stage along this that are convincing to donors, but as Lewis would always say, how do we also, this is an advocacy piece, persuade donors to be comfortable with contribution and to stop, because that's not it's the attribution contribution thing that's also in the clear, And I think unless we can get people to be, so I feel that's why it's worth, from our perspective, worth making a big investment in developing metrics and indicators that make people feel happy to follow you along in the area of change. Say, okay, I understand that you're able to measure at a high level of accountability what your inputs on system strengthening are. I'm happy that you're able to measure reasonably well whether the systems are getting stronger enough. And I'm relaxed about that. I'll hold you very accountable for what you're doing, and want to see attribution there, but I'm happy to live with contribution on the system strengthening, because otherwise we're all lost. If everyone's saying, I want to see what my $100,000 or my $100 million in comparison, how much has contributed to that, forget about it.
Well, that's why one of the SWA principles is a shared reporting and accountability, but figuring out how to do that is really quite a challenge, because it should be done at the country level. But nobody's quite gotten it. Speaking of which, could you move forward a slide or two? I had a question. start there. The solutions and testing part of this, which makes complete sense, and it's an iterative process, I get that. But I also get the sense that governments really don't want to be in that business. And just like governments want, the host governments want, they think about it as a infrastructure problem. They basically want somebody to come in and say, I know how to solve the problem. You know, this is how I'm going to get these people service, and that's really what they're set up to do. That process of testing and getting better at things is something that's not really built into most governments. They find it hard to do. So I'm curious, and others can weigh in on this. How do you?
But I'm going to push back on that because I think that I'm not a big believer in national research institutes or something. Okay, but I've never, in 15, 20, 25, whatever years to do this, I've never not got local government people, local engineers, national ministers super passionate about this stuff once you do it. I'm not saying government. Government is part of the process.
Right.
I mean, they're not the ones doing the measuring. That's what you bring academia in for. They're not necessarily even the ones coming up with the new ideas. That's what you bring the private sector or whoever, what smart people you have. But, Aaron Cabrisi in Uganda is absolutely passionate about this. He does it. He wants to do this. I mean, everybody, I think they do want to.
Can I follow up there on the same thing? Is that, so let me start by saying is, I think IRC is playing a really valuable role in what some people call a backbone organization to manage that process. So in my old days, when I was working at the World Bank and I was trying to convince some a task team leader on operations to make a big loan for whether it's rural sanitation or rural water, here's a great idea, he or she would say, great idea, how do I do it, when it was for like one district, that worked well, good evidence. How do I do it not for one district, but for 2,000 districts? So this scaling up question for me is, how do you get an equivalent backbone organization, and it may not be equivalent in terms of international expertise, in those 2,000 districts?
I think that's a great question. That's a killer question for this whole approach, and it's not just here. I mean, it's also for the FSGs or wherever people are doing collective impact.
Absolutely.
I'm not convinced that you need to have, at a certain point, you have to be able to systematize this, roll this out. I think you need the backbone organization while you're doing, particularly that phase 2, right? But I don't think, if you have to retest, let's say you're developing, a model for, let's say you're doing the Safe Water Network. You're experimenting around a model for private sector provision of small water enterprises in towns of 2,000 to 5,000 people. You spend 5, 10 years testing it. At a certain point, you come up with a set of recommendations. You say, well, we're going to have to change the legislation so that there's a 15-year concession and yada, yada, yada. Then you roll that out. So I think you need the backbone organization for the testing phase, but at a certain point, you do systematize it and you roll it out. At that point, and the example I always think about on this is, this showing my age, is kind of participatory rural appraisal, right? Which we came out of ODI and government chambers, and you notice that all the success stories in the early days where it was these super special agricultural extension workers with these amazing skill sets and super passionate. And then, I remember it. Then they rolled it out. And then you're trying to get some guy who spends half his time down the beer hall to do a whole load of PRA. It was a real challenge. And then I remember Robert Chambers writing all this stuff about, it's been cheapened, the people are just trying to, just rolled out, they're not putting enough money into training the facilitators. I think, well, you should have seen that. That was always going to happen. That happens in schools. That happens
but Eddie, actually, if you look at the rural sanitation program in Java, I think you did a lot of that, but then when you scaled it up, you weren't doing.
And you're not doing that.
I think once you get to scale out or scale up, whatever you want to call it, and you're doing it, you had been through enough learning in enough places that you had set that up in a way that government, in fact, could do it. They didn't do it as brilliantly as it was done when there were other agencies doing it, but they did it well enough.
So just one distinction. So what you're both referring to, I think, is more phase 2. So we came up with solutions and approaches. Exactly. But I was talking more about phase 1, whether you think WP was not vision and diagnosis at the different groups, and that's not a thing that we promoted. So really, when I was thinking, that question was more about phase one, vision.
Yeah, sorry, that's good. But I think again, you can systematize that. So you test your asset inventories in 5 districts, and then once you got a methodology that folks in the country are confident with, then you roll out asset inventories and just say it's part of the system. You have to do an asset inventory as part of your. Every country has planning, has a district or national level planning cycles. One of the things that delayed this a little bit was making sure that we fed it into the National Planning Commission way of planning, so that it looked like a proper something that is recognizable to Ghanaian bureaucrats as a master plan. Because otherwise you go in and you do this thing, they're like, well, what's this? It doesn't fit into our cycle. So then I think that's part of your mechanism to scale, but then you have to understand how the national planning cycle works, and then you feed into it. And I think that's part of your kind of mechanism to scale.
I want to go I'm going to interrupt for a second. We're going to break in a minute. There is one more question online that I'll hold for a second, but so John, did you have to go?
I do have to go, but
do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, can I just reflect a little bit? I'm from the health sector, and we focus on system strengthening across all levels of the health sector, specifically around community health systems and primary health system. And all of these discussions, it's really sort of fun to be a fly on the wall in this discussion because it's the same type of discussions we're having. We've talked about measurement. We've spent years working on leadership and management models and governance, how you govern within the health sector, working on human resources, of course, working on resources in general, accountability, thinking about social accountability. So there's a lot, as you talk about intersectoral collaboration, and that there's a lot that is very relevant from the work in the health sector for this. But one thing that we're talking a lot now about, because we're all thinking about this journey to self-reliance and organizational capacity development within that, but then also domestic resource mobilization.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Are you working?
Yes, big time. Because basically, in the end, money's the problem. And Lewis was talking about the experience of water for people in Bolivia and how you manage to get to everyone. And what I keep saying is that's in a middle-income environment. Now we're taking a model that's worked in a middle-income environment. We're trying it in a least developed country environment. And a lot of the work that was successful in Bolivia was about teaching mayors how to tap into national funding streams. In a lot of Africa, we don't create those national funding streams. They don't exist. And then it's the domestic resource mobilization, 100%, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
that's the challenge.
But thank you.
Efficiency and resources.
And we love hearing from the health sector because you guys are 10 years ahead of this. So, great.
Well, it's exciting because we're working on an integrated health program in Malawi at the district level and have WASH built into it. So we're looking to learn from you all as well. So I'm sorry I have to run.
I'd love to hear about your.
He started networking already.
Last thing. Guess you join us.
Do you have a question, Sean?
I do. So Patrick, I did a little perusing on the sanitation part of the master plan. Very happy to see the ship flow diagram in there. Thank you. I think the question I have is but when I dove a little deeper, I started to see more prescriptive things like 50% KBIP. I wonder how helpful that level of prescription is going to be when you're trying to engage the private sector and you're trying to innovate, especially around sanitation, right? And also that brings me to, I think, what fits a little bit more into the wider conversation that was just coming up about, how can this go, the how part, the how part and the scaling part, and what are some of the, it just seems to me like the process is very much focused, even your system diagram, on the policy and the government planning piece, and which is great, but the planning does not, as you know, always result in the doing. And so, like, how do you see that kind of like pivoting now? Like, now you've got the plan. How is that really going to pivot into action that delivers sustainable services? Like, that's, to me, that's still very unclear, even in this diagram and in the conversations we've had. It's all been about how do we get a good plan, and that's great. Yeah, I agree. We need all that. Like, we need a good plan. The fact that it took a year is a little concerning, but yes, get a good plan. And I mean, are there ways we could do rapid startups? Are there ways that we can? Because we've got a lot of ground to cover here, and we do need to. As Eddie said, like, I liked his point. Like, it's great doing it in one district. How does that then replicate into 2,000 districts? Cheaper, more cost effectively, more efficiently, all of those things. So there's a lot there, and I think it warrants a much larger kind of conversation, and especially, like, I also think this is very sort of geared at the water piece, even though, we also think about systems when we think about market systems, and that's another subsystem to the systems, right? So there's a lot there to unpack and look at, but I think it would be interesting to hear your guys' perspective on the how, and we can have a larger conversation offline about how we've done the how for sanitation, because I think we do have some good experience with that and building more. So,
are you perhaps give an answer to that now?
So there's one last question, and so Chris can go to sleep,
Yeah, let me say one thing to John.
It's related to this, and it's just about whether or not is the prediction that to do this again will also take a year's time, or is it something that you think over time might shrink the timing that it would take to create a district plan? And I have a response to Chris, but I'll let you respond first.
So let me start. Firstly, if you asked me if we went in as consultants, as IRC, could we write a better plan than that? Sure. So could any halfway competent consultant. You could make it more strategic. You could not insist on that. That's not the point. This is an Irish backed out of the process. This is the first master plan of any that I'm aware of in the whole of Ghana that has never taken as an explicit end point that they're going to get universal access. Frankly, that's about the only part I care about it. That and the fact that they actually went and did some asset inventories, went and did some what are people getting already. They put some numbers in there, honestly. The numbers, who knows? But they tried. It's a first step. So that to me that's the single most important point. Second important point, the second point in there is that this, have a look at it. I mean, this little MOU, which is between the district and between Stakeholder Network and World Vision and all the rest, I think is the next step, because that begins to talk to now. That says, as Stakeholder Network, we are going to do safe water systems in the district in the towns of 2,000 to 5,000 people. So it's pretty clear what they're going to do. World Vision are really clear that and it is focused, it is water focused at the moment, because at the moment that's the other piece. We've got a donor who's prepared to finance some of this master plan. So that's also, but they're also a donor who are committed to helping us to identify financing for the sanitation part. So we do. So you need money. You don't want to pretend that you don't need money. I completely agree with you. A big part of the solution here is going to be private sector. We've got to find ways for the private sector, and it is about marketplaces. That is part of the system. But that's where we are.
And they talk about that. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, like, hopefully it will offer that flexibility, sure.
But the reality is, my feeling is that's why I'm so passionate about this. In the end, government is the duty bearer. I don't think government should be necessarily delivering services. And this one we cannot fly because you guys are evangelical about the private sector delivering services, and I'd argue that there's nowhere in the world that really that the private sector is particularly delivering water or sanitation services. It's largely a public sector thing, but I'm happy to let that one play out in the field. But it's clear who's the duty bearer for getting services to people, and that's government. So for me, that's the big win here, is that we've got government to, for the first time ever, look beyond their normal 5-year planning cycle of saying how much money do we have and how many things can we build, to actually engage with the idea that, geez, we've got to try and get to universal access, and let's begin thinking about what that might look like. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Could we do it faster? Frankly, why would you, who cares if it takes a year? I mean, you're talking a district of 90,000 people. You want them to do a decent asset inventory. You want them to do some proper measurement. So what if it takes a year? It's a 12-year strategic plan that's visualizing getting to universal access. I think a year's fine. Can we make it cheaper? I hope so. Can we make it into a sort of a set of blocks that can be facilitated by local consultants? Yeah, absolutely, I think so. And that would be part of it.
Before we break for drinks and continue the conversation, the one thing I would add too is that this is aligned with the planning process in Ghana. And so in Ghana, they have 5-year planning, which is one type of plans, of which this is a contribution to, and then they have annual planning. And so you're not going to get a process that doesn't, if it doesn't fit into their planning, then it doesn't really matter. It's not effective. And so I think that's the case in a lot of different countries. The same as in Uganda, they have a process in which they're already doing planning. The planning just isn't sufficient necessarily. There is, a bit of a system around the planning, but maybe it's not with the same vision, it's not the same thing. So, I think that's something to take into account, is that this process is part of this is now their annual plan, or longer. This is the longer plan.
I just want to clarify one thing. When I say market system, that is not synonymous with private sector.
I know.
Private sector is a part, but market system is.
We were having over beer.
So we're going to break. We're going to close this. There's beer, there's wine, there's sodas, still coffee, water. We've got some snacks and things, so stick around for a drink, continue the conversation. And Chris, we're gonna let you, I don't know if it's dinner time or go to bed or whatever you're doing. He's allowed.
It is late there.
It's late. It's like 11. It's like 11 or midnight. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris. And just keep an eye out. We're going to continue to have some other different types of this learning exchange happening over the next couple of months as well. So, and the systems, and don't forget all systems go. If you're interested in contributing in any way to the symposium, let us know.
And the call for papers will be coming out.
Oh, it's 11:30.